I'm going to do a screen share and let's just get rocking and rolling. I guess prior to that, everybody is on mute. If you want to talk, feel free just to unmute yourself and speak up. Does anybody want to say anything or have any burning questions before we get rolling here?
Does anybody have financials? Did anybody bring financials?
Nothing was turned into me.
Okay.
Hold on, I'm still letting people in here. So I would say maybe for next week, we'll have potentially a property management company and FedEx route. And then a couple other people said they were hoping for financials, but I don't know what the industries are yet.
Okay. I'll take care of admitting people if you want to screen share.
Then I will screen share and we'll get down to it. So about 4 or 5 months ago, Jake and I were calling and we were talking to brokers and we were just kind of letting them know, who we are. We're looking to buy businesses. Here's what our buy box is. If you come across anything, will you let us know? And on one of those cold calls, a local broker here said, I've got an appliance company that is coming to the market pretty soon, and I'll give you guys a first look at it if you're serious. And we said, yeah, that sounds awesome. At that time, our buy box was any company that can service a property management company. For those of you that don't know, we own a property management company. And so the initial goal was to quote unquote own the supply chain. We wanted to own all of the vendors that we frequently use. That would be HVAC, plumbing, landscaping, cleaning, which is why we started the cleaning company, just any vendors that we were frequently calling, painting, handyman, so on and so forth. So we told the broker that, and he said, I've got this appliance repair company, and actually their business model is the property management companies are their main customer, and they call them and they pitch a maintenance program. So each of their customers are actually paying, I don't remember the number at this point, but let's say it's $200 a year. And then anytime they need any sort of maintenance repair, that's already sunk into the price of that $200. Obviously, if they need parts or anything big, it'll be more than that, but that would just be the routine maintenance. So what was super attractive about that is this company created a model that made the cash flow predictable. Every single month, they were guaranteed X amount of revenue. So they kind of turned a handyman type company into a company that had a recurring revenue model, which was super enticing. Other details we knew about the company: they'd been around for 15 plus years. They had roughly 40 employees. The guy wanted to sell because he was going to help his sister run an actual appliance sales store, so like a Sears or any of the stores that actually sell the appliances. For whatever reason, that was the direction he wanted to go, probably because he'd been doing this for 15 years and was just beaten up. And like I already said, most of their sales were on that maintenance program. So the cash flow was super, super steady. For the numbers, the company was projected, we talked to him a little before the end of 2023. So they were projected to end the year just north of $6 million in sales. The gross profit was 1.5 million. Again, for people that are new to this, the gross profit is not the final number. The net profit is the final number. So the gross profit would be before we have the expenses taken out of it. EBITDA, 720K, and the seller's discretionary earnings was 860K. Remember, when we're buying these small companies, it's the seller discretionary earnings. That's the number we're trying to extract out of it. That's all of the net income. So all of the profit of the company, plus any of those add backs that the seller has, plus the owner's salary. The seller wanted $5 million for his company. And he also said he was open to seller financing if it was a qualified buyer. At this point, we have no idea if it's worth $5 million, but signed an NDA with the broker and he sent over financials. So right now we're going to find out what we think this company is worth. Again, anytime you have questions, just holler. So anytime Jake and I get financials, the very first thing we want to look at is the profit and loss statement. That is the most interesting, fun to look at, and is really going to help us come up to what we think that company is valued at. If you guys want to do this along with me, I think it would be most value, but you are welcome to do whatever the heck you want. I am not your parent. When I am pulling up P&Ls, something I always do is pull up a sheet of paper on the side. I like to do it by hand for whatever reason, but since you guys can't see if I write by hand, I'm just gonna do it on my computer. So I am looking for any questions I would have for seller. And these aren't necessarily gonna be related to the financials at all. These are just things I come up with, like I already know why he's selling, so not that one. But of your 40 employees, are they all driving vehicles? Are any of those employees non-revenue generating? How many vehicles do you have? How much life is left on the vehicles? Kind of so on and so forth there. What else? I would want to know, of course, financial questions. So these are questions that I'm going to have as I'm reading the P&Ls and balance sheet. I have questions 100% of the time.
Would be nice if it was just perfectly put
Yep,
together and
that
explained.
is a byproduct of buying small businesses. It's going to be messy. I'm going to want to know seller add backs. I'm going to give to the seller, and then I'm going to want to know my add backs. Again, I would typically just print out the P&Ls and write it directly on there. I think it's nice and clean that way, but for the sake of today, we're going to do it here. I'm going to minimize this screen. Perfect. So P&Ls. This is its official name is the income statement. Right on the top, though, it says profit and loss. Kind of the industry slang is going to be P&L. So that's what we're going to call it for today. Profit and loss. Says it right there on the top. Typically, this is going to be for a 12-month period. Most of the time, it's just going to be from January 1st through the end of the calendar year. Because it was only a little bit after September when we looked at these documents, they just put through the end of September on it. So we're actually looking at a 9-month period, which means we're going to have to do a little bit of math to kind of derive what we think the full year would be. The very first thing I want to do anytime I'm looking at P&Ls is just see just top line numbers. So total income through the first 9 months of the year, they did $4.47 million. It was definitely a healthy company. And then I literally just scroll all the way to the very bottom. And the very bottom number is the net income. That's their total profit. That's $684,000 of profit this company's made in the first 9 months of the year. Some serious cash we're talking about here. So first thing I notice is that's probably around 15% profit margins. 4.4 million in sales, 680 in profit, about 15%. I would expect a appliance repair company like this probably to be closer to 25, if not even 30% margins. So I am also now expecting that this profit and loss is going to have some add backs in there for us. To figure out what they're projected to do for 12 months, you could just take that 4.47. I'm going to do this live here with you. I'll take the 4470, so $4.47 million. And I am going to multiply that. You do it by 3 or by 9 months. I'll just do it I'll divide it by 9 months, forgive me. So I divide it by 9 months. They're averaging just under $500,000 in sales a month. And then I'm going to multiply that by 12 months. So I divided it by 9 months because that's how many months have been captured on this document. And I'm going to multiply it by 12 months because that's how many months are in a year. So that's
Can I add something real quick?
Please.
It really depends on the industry as well, right? Because if it's something that is very heavy in the wintertime, those sales might be very much increased. Or if it's something that is very slow in the winter, also might be very decreased. So depending on the industry, something to just keep in mind.
Very, very good point. This company, we know because of the recurring revenue model, this is probably safe. But there's a lot of companies that boom off during the holiday seasons. And there's a lot of companies that go quiet in the winter months as well. So we're making a little bit of assumptions here, but as you do due diligence, you'd want to see maybe a couple years of what that last quarter looked like, just to make sure what you're thinking is accurate.
Kyle,
So,
when trying to figure that out, would you want to ask for more years of the P&Ls to either determine the seasonality possibly of the company itself, and B, to be able to gauge whether or not the company is in an incline or kind of in a decline, I guess, historically?
100%. I'm going to want to look at least 3 years of financials. And if I don't have Q4, I'd like to even see just Q4 financials for that as well. It's really easy. Most of these small businesses, the bookkeeping is going to be done on QuickBooks, and it's super easy for them to pull you any report you need. So you can be very specific on the time frame you want. On this report I'm looking at right here, I can see 2023 on the left side and then 22 on the right side. So you can get reports pulled where you can even have 3 years in a row on it. So I can see just looking at this that last year they did just shy of 4 million through this time period. This year they're 4.4. That's like, I don't know, north of 10% at least of sales increase. So that's a positive sign. It looks like a healthy growing company. So we had 5.96. So their claim of surpassing $6 million in sales seems pretty reasonable to me. And then I'll do that same calculation down here. Company made 684,000. I'll go ahead and divide that by 9 months. Looks like they're making $76,000 a month. I'll multiply that by 12, $912,000. So I got to write that somewhere because what I'm trying to do is come up with an offer. So wherever you want to write it, on Word, on a little note card, on your hand, $912,000 is what they're claiming for profit on paper here. And now our job is to go through all of this like a data scientist and just try to understand each and every line item and see if there's anything that doesn't make sense, where we have questions, or if there's places where we see some obvious add backs.
And if you have questions and you're not in a place where you can turn your mic on and ask them or whatever, feel free to type them up in the chat and we'll monitor those.
Perfect. You just holler it out, Jake, if I need to answer anything, or feel free to step up and do it yourself. Since I actually have 2 years of financials side by side here, the very first thing I might do is just go through the entire thing and look and see that it all makes sense. I can see in 2023 that the sales were a little bit larger than they were in 2022, like 10, 12, 13%, something like that. So it would make sense that everything on the left column is probably inflated just a little bit. My direct labor, $60,000 more, seems logical. Just kind of scrolling through this, fuel, I'm spending a little bit more money on gas, a little more money on repairs, a little more money on maintenance, customer repairs, a little bit less. Maybe last year there was just a big mistake and it cost us a little bit of money. Workers' comp is a little bit less. That is definitely illogical, but okay. Spent a little bit more on tools. All of our payroll should be just a little bit higher. Yeah, across the board it is, except for unemployment tax, which is probably a good thing. Payroll tax a little bit higher. Yes. Gross profit a little bit higher. Yes. This all looks really good. Here's something interesting. Under expenses, the subcontract labor last year was $37,000. This year, it's only $4,000. So that would lead me to believe that we now have more W-2 employees. We're not farming out as much work. Uniforms, we're spending $4,000 a year. Insurance expense. All right, here's something worth asking. 602 insurance expense. In 2022, they had a $90,000 insurance expense, which would make me wonder if a wash machine fell on one of my employees' faces or something, because this year we only spent $471 on that. So that would be a good question to just ask him. There might be a very funny story behind that. And then how often does that happen? How often is there a really big expensive? What did that do to your insurance premium? That sounds like that must have been really expensive. Dental insurance, negative $9,000. How the heck? It's like the dentist paid them $9,000. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Health insurance, 163. That is a healthy expense, but makes sense. If you thought you could get health insurance for cheaper, would that be an add back you would then give to the seller? Does anyone have thoughts on that? Or you thought you could do rent for cheaper or buy supplies for cheaper? If you thought you could do anything more efficiently for them, would that be a sell back you would give, an add back you would give to them? No, that is your add back. we're going to keep track of what's their ad back and what's
Dang,
our
dude, I
ad
raised
back.
my hand. You didn't call on me.
Oh, I have the screen minimized.
Oh, okay.
I need you to take some initiative and speak up.
That would be a
Same.
no, right? Because that's our ad back.
That is our ad back. That would be a strong no. What I'm doing when I'm going through this is I'm trying to figure out things like money that they paid themselves or vacations that they went on that would be their ad back. They could argue, well, that would be company profit, but I just choose to have fun with it. I chose to do something different with it. Life and disability insurance. That took a huge jump this year. We could ask why. So here's a great example. Life insurance for the officer. So if it was life insurance for the employees of 35K, not only would that not be an ad back, I would argue that you would not want to get rid of that to save yourself money either. If the employees are used to good health benefits and a gas card and a cell phone and a company party, things like that, like that's not really something you want to take away from the employees just to save money. It's a really good way to start a mutiny. So you might look at someone's financials and be like, man, this guy is so generous to his employees. That's crazy. I would never spend that much on those employees. Well, now you kind of have to because he already set that standard. And if you come in there and start pulling things back from those employees, I would say that's extremely ill-advised. So just keep that into your calculations. For my point I was actually originally going to make here on life insurance for the officer, that's his life insurance. That's not his employee's life insurance. So that $35,000 would be a legitimate add back that you could give him. So I would go back to my sheet here where I'm taking notes. And for seller add backs, I've got 35K life insurance. Let's go back real quick. That was the first add back we actually saw that was legitimate. And then one of my questions would be questions for seller, and it would be a financial question because that's where I found it. What was 90K insurance expense 2022? And then you could ask a question about how frequently does that happen? What happened? Is the person okay? What did that do to your premium? Just whatever you're curious about. All right, now's where we get into the kind of the day-to-day costs of the business. Fringe benefits, you're not gonna be able to mess with that. Advertising and promotion. This is another one where, to me, advertising for a company that's doing $5 million, they're only spending $1,700 on it. That is extremely low, which means there's probably another line item in here where there's some more spend, or there's not. But either way, if you were to say, oh man, a company doing $5 million a year in sales, they should be doing at least $100,000 in marketing. You can't dock the seller for that because what you're buying is what it is today. And presumably, if you spend $100,000 on marketing and you spend it appropriately, you should be getting all of the benefit of that. That $100,000 you spend on marketing sure as hell better bring you back at least $101,000, right? You got to get some sort of ROI on that. And I think people that are good at that are able to get a 2 or a 3x ROI on that. So just because the advertising spend isn't where you believe it should be, that is not going to be something that you can extract from the seller when you make an offer price. That wouldn't be fair. The bank service charge, credit card interest fees, like those just kind of are what they are, right? Those don't seem insanely unreasonable to me. If I was buying a company for 15 grand and 30% of my expenses, $5,000 went to that, I would say that's asinine. This is a $5 million company. So any of these couple $1,000 costs, I'd say it's just a cost of doing business. Software expense, this is definitely a question I would have is what software do you have? What are you guys utilizing? Do you have a proprietary CRM, scheduling software? What does that look like? So that would be another question I would have. And that could, oh boy, that could actually just be like a normal question. Like what kind of softwares are you using? What kind of tech software? And I want to know as far as scheduling, inbound calls, lead generation, everything, what kind of softwares they're using. Dues and subscriptions, non-event, training and education. You could ask what's $1,300 on a $5 million company. Who cares? Business license permits, $5,000. You got meals and entertainment. That is at $7,700. You would definitely you could definitely argue that that is a seller add back. When I'm doing these, I typically accidentally forget to give him credit for that. Just if I can get away with it, why not? Office expenses, that's basically office supplies. $14,000 sounds expensive on that, but it looks a heck of a lot cheaper than the year before where they did $43,000. I don't know what that is, but it seems really high to me. I don't feel like I would need to spend that much. Parking tolls, nature of the job, printing and reproduction. These are all super, super small numbers. Here's a good one. Accounting. The year before they spent 16,000. This year they spent 32,000. That seems unreasonable to me. That seems super, super high. I would venture to say I can get accounting at 1,500 a month. My accounting expense is probably 18,000 a year. Again, I'm not giving him credit for that, but I am just going to make a note over under my, stop doing that, under my add backs. So if I think I can do it for $18,000 and that his is 32, that would mean I got a 14K accounting. So I think I can do it more efficiently than him. So that's an extra little over $1,000 a month that I think I can save just on the accounting. Rent expense. Given the nature of this company, I'm assuming this isn't something you're gonna be able to do out of your house. There's gonna be a bunch of vehicles. He's probably gonna need a warehouse. 3,400 a year. It's like 3,000 a month. Seems pretty reasonable.
Super reasonable.
Seems really reasonable. I would almost be more interested in seeing if I can secure a long-term lease at that price than trying to save money or beat him up over the price of that or anything. Here's a really good one. The telephone expense. $22,000 on telephone. I don't know about you, but unless my telephone is like gold plated, I would not be okay spending $22,000 on phones. So I don't know. He has 40 employees. Does he supply each of them with a cell phone? Like, how in the world is his telephone expense $22,000? Again, it is what it is. That's not going to be his add back. That's what he's been spending on it. I'm fairly certain that I can get phones, even cell phones for people for a couple grand. So I would, at 24, I would think worst case scenario, I'm spending 4,000. But Jake and I are buying phone numbers for $20 that are like $1.99 a month through these online providers that have really cool features to them. So I mean, being generous, I think I'm going to save 20K on phones. But I'm also going to put some question marks because I want to talk to him and make sure I fully understand why he's spending so much. So the question is, why are your phones so expensive? Phone lines so expensive. So I want to verify this before I give myself that number in my head. Utilities 10K. I mean, that sounds expensive to me, but what do I know? They might have a special dumpster out back or something to be junking a lot of scrap metal from all their appliances they're working on. Marketing. Okay. So there's another $10,000 in marketing. Again, it seems super, super light, but it is what it is. It's what they've been working with. If 90 some odd % of their business is that recurring revenue from the property management companies, maybe they don't need to do much marketing. Maybe he's super happy with 40 employees bringing in $1 million a year of profit. It would be hard to argue otherwise. Meals, entertainment, $900, too small to even worry about. Repair and maintenance, $6K, just cost of doing business. Travel expense, that very well could be a seller add back, but maybe he's going to trade shows or something. That's not like a huge, I think even going to Mexico, I could burn through that much money in a weekend. So it's not a huge travel expense. That one last year of 16,000 is a lot bigger. I think he would put a stronger argument as to giving that as a add back. Company party, drop 7K on it. Could be a bunch of Friday pizza parties, one giant party. Either way, if your attitude is I don't want to have a party, it's too late. He already signed you up for it. Company, all the employees are already expecting it. It's just a cost of doing business at this point. All right, payroll expenses. This is something to pay attention to. This is going to always have like the employee wages and everything. Oftentimes, if the owner is taking a salary, well, not oftentimes, if the owner is ever taking a salary, it's always going to be booked under your payroll expenses. It's either going to be owner wages or owner salary or officer wages. or owner wages. Those are basically, you're looking for the word officer or the word owner. So this guy took $54,600 to pay himself this year.
Is there a benefit in doing that?
In paying yourself,
Yeah.
there is. And that benefit is, at the end of the day, you are paying taxes on this number. At the end of the day, that's the company profit. That's what I'm paying taxes on. The more money I can make magically disappear throughout the year is going to make that number a heck of a lot less, which is going to make me a lot less taxes. When you're taking owner pay, it really depends how you have your legal entity set up. Some people take draws instead of pay based on how, if it's in LLC or incorporated or partnership, and there's a number of different ways you can set that up, would be the most tax beneficial. But you're still paying income tax on your wages as an officer, but it's going to be less than if you just left it as company profits, which is why this person did that.
Thank
So
you.
that's why you're going to see like a ton of travel expenses. People put their personal vehicles on there. People buy personal stuff. They take their families out to dinner all the time and say they're employee dinners. On small businesses, it's like a game of making this number as close to zero as humanly possible. We've met with companies that were making like maybe like 200K or so a year, but on paper they lost like 12K. Like their goal was to get this as low as humanly possible. But we were looking like at their travel expenses were like 30K, and their eating out was like 18K, and they had all their family cell phones and all their vehicles and insurances. It was crazy.
Which isn't, obviously not tax advice here. But something to keep in mind, if a company is not taking a profit at the end of the year and claiming money on taxes, you just have to keep in mind how financeable that's going to be with the SBA if you plan on using the SBA. Because SBA likes to see a company that is making money and paying taxes on money, right?
Yep, really good point. And the SBA will let them get some ad backs, but if you go to the SBA, like these 15 different line items of ad backs, they're not going to think very fondly of that at all. So as you're running and operating your company, it makes a lot of sense to make your profits look as low as possible. When if you're getting ready to sell your business, you want 3 years of that company looking as profitable as possible. And then for admin wages, $54,000. Again, just working through the end of this is all pretty straightforward stuff. And that is how we get to our net income. So going through that, again, super fast since we already went through it once. I'm just looking for items that I think would be fair to give the seller. The biggest ones to me are going to be, I already forgot, which is why we write these things down. Definitely the 54K of the owner's salary. So if I put that 54K on top of the 684, but remember we did the math, and over a 12-year period, he's actually on a run rate to have $912,000 if they keep up on the same trajectory. So we put 54 on top of that, and that basically puts him at $965,000.
Wouldn't we also have to calculate the salary, or is it a salary? I guess, or wouldn't we also have to divide that by 9 and then times it by 12?
Ooh, look at you. Good point. So that's only 3/4 of it. So you could multiply that times the other quarter. So yeah, you could divide that by 9, which we'll do right now. So 55,000 divided by 9, 6,000 times 12. That number is actually closer to 73. So now we're closer to like 985. And then honestly, for the simplicity of math, like he's got a couple thousand of travel in there. His phone is ridiculous. He's probably going to say, oh yeah, I got some personal in there. And for accounting, I do my wife's accounting. Like he's going to probably say he's got a bunch of personal expenses in there, which would be hard to argue. He probably doesn't. For the simplicity of math, we're probably really at 990. Let's just say the company makes $1 million. So we'll say your seller discretionary earnings is $1 million. And then in addition to that, I also think from day one that I've got $35,000 that I can add on top of that of my things that I can do more efficiently. But I'm sure as heck not going to give you a discount or an additional offering on that based off what I think I can do, because that would be my add back. I've earned that once I buy the company. So often people are like, well, yeah, Jake and Kyle, once you guys buy this company, I mean, within 2 years, you're going to be able to double sales. And if you just do X, Y, Z, you're like, well, yeah, that's exactly why we're going to buy this, but I'm not going to pay you for what I'm going to do. It's the same to real estate. They love to say, well, if you just raise it to market rents, then this is a 6 cap. You should buy this. I was like, no, I pay you for what it is today. And typically, if it was that easy, why didn't you just do it yourself? So it's not usually as easy as people try to lead you to believe. Okay, so from this document, we've extracted that the seller discretionary earning is probably right around $1 million. Does anybody have questions on any of that thus far? And again, this is meant to be super quick. I spent, I guess it was 30 minutes here together, but I could do this in 10, 15 minutes. And it just gives me a rough idea roughly of what it is. And I'll do way deeper due diligence if we actually end up getting an LOI, signing it, ready to buy it. But I want a ballpark price.
So what was his total payroll expenses? I mean, for being 40 employees.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So his admin wages was only 54,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then his payroll taxes was, his FICA expenses were 120. So this is what I'm seeing here. But his direct labor was 1.48.
Okay. Gotcha.
So this leads me to believe he has a heck of a lot of 1099 contractors. Whether they only work for him or he's utilizing a whole bunch of other smaller appliance repair companies or handymen.
If you, I think at the bottom too, there was some contractor pay.
There was subcontractor of 4,200 there, which is kind of weird. There's definitely a lot of questions to just be asked around the employees, because it seems like there's a big gap missing there.
What's that, 25% or so of labor though?
Yeah,
mean,
the labor to me seems,
sound
no, it
too
seems
bad.
appropriate. I just wonder how much of that's 1099 and how much of it's W-2. But yeah, that's a good point, Jake. If this labor was like 3.5 million, that would be like, that doesn't make sense. If it was $200,000 on 5 million in sales on a company that all they're doing is selling a labor service, that would make no sense.
Right around that 20 to 30% range is like where you'd probably want to see it.
It's a good sweet spot. And you'll see it up at 40, 45 pretty frequently too. But I think it's at a healthy place, as Jake was saying, kind of the 25 range. But going through this financials, I did not see a whole bunch of really big red flags, honestly. It was pretty clean financials. So I got this SD. We've got the SD of about $1 million. This company, let's look at the balance sheet. That's going to be important on this company. There's probably a heck of a lot of vehicles. We are only purchasing the assets of this company. So as far as like money in their bank accounts, they got almost 500,000 in their bank account. That's not really ours. We're only buying the actual assets that come with the company. And so the other side is I'm not buying any of your liabilities there. So you've got a bunch of debt, your problem, not mine. The very first thing I do every time I read a balance sheet to decide if it's even worth investing another minute looking at it is make sure the balance sheet is balanced. Does the assets equal the liabilities plus equity? Total assets, 1.4 million. I can just go all the way to the bottom. Total liabilities and equity, 1.4 million. Perfect. We have a working document that is worth reading. I blacked it out, but it had they had like a bunch of money like in money markets and stuff like that. Just a little bit in their savings account. So they got about 500K cash on hand. That's not going to be my cash, but it's kind of the sign of a healthy company. That's a lot of cash just be sitting in your bank account. They've got some like small little loans. Looks like money that they lent out, money due from Highway 61 appliance store. So it looks like they have some open account receivables where they should be getting 200K on that. An employee advance of 4,000. Again, this isn't stuff that I'm buying or inheriting, so not super concerned. It's these fixed assets that I more care about. In autos and trucks, they have $700,000, $1,000 worth of computers, $5,800 worth of fixtures and equipment. I'm guessing that's a lot of tools and probably spare parts. Leasehold improvements, 120K. That would be like leasehold improvements would be like build outs that they've done onto their building. So I would really argue how much of that I'm willing to pay for. And they say, well, yeah, we added all of this stuff and it makes it easier to operate. It's like, well, great. And that's perfect. But when I go to sell this, or if my lease ever ends, like how much is that stuff actually worth at that point? So I'm definitely not going to pay you anywhere near the 120 for that. A whole building of $7,000. I don't know what that is. Probably because one of those like stick, what do they call this, stick sheds or whatever on the back side of the building or something. $30,000 of trailer. They put an accumulated depreciation of $475,000 on that. So if you add all that up, it's like around 1.1 million. They're saying that those assets have already depreciated $475,000, so that the total assets you're purchasing today are worth $445,000. That's,
How much are we going to pay for that? Those.
I was going to say, I'm probably still only going to pay you 70% of that. The fact that they put the depreciation in was kind of helping trying to lead us to the water and drink it. But I just don't know whenever I can take assets off a balance sheet and just sell it that day for that same amount of money. So I'm not going to pay you that full amount because you already did I think our standard math would be, we're going to give you 60 to 70% of whatever you claim. Because they put depreciation on it, maybe I'll give you 80% or something like that. But again, I'm just coming up with a rough number. When we do our actual deep dive due diligence, I'm going to want to see bank statements and actually physically see the equipment. On all the trucks, I'll run VIN numbers and figure out what I really think it's worth to get that more dialed in. But for the sake of now, I'll say I'll give you 80% of that $445,000. So I will take that number times 0.8, $356,000. For easy math, I'm going to say your assets are worth $350,000 to me. Honestly, that's what I needed from the sheet. But just because I have it up in front of me, I might as well look at the rest and see if there's anything that's weird or that raises any suspicion. For the rest of the assets, it's essentially irrelevant to me right now. Liabilities, they've got some credit card debt of $75,000. If they had $0 in their bank account and the company was making $30,000 a year, I would think that could be a really bad sign. They're sitting on $500K cash. This is probably at a low interest rate. It could be a revolving credit. Like, I'm not concerned about that at all. Just some payroll taxes, accrued wages that are still owed. They got $100K of debt here. That Highway 61 that owes them $200K, they owe them $24K. So they probably got a pretty healthy sell to them on terms. Pretty big number there. Well, child support, that is not going to be my baby, so not my problem. Little 401K, which is nice. They're offering 401K to their employees. Nothing big there. A little more loan. There's a significant size. Oh, that's an SBA loan. So they are still paying off an SBA loan. With him owning the company for over 15 years, I'm not sure how or why, but maybe they refinanced or did something. It could be a question definitely worth asking him. Ford loan paid off. Tiny money to credit union. Again, not buying any of your liabilities. Don't overly care. However, under shareholder distribution, Dave and his wife both took out $98,000. So that is another $200,000 of seller's discretionary earnings. I still want to understand this though. Do you guys always take out $100,000? When did you take it out? Why did you take it out? With how we set up our LLC, our CPA advised us, take out the lowest amount of owner wages as possible. And then based off a percentage of profit this year, we're going to take out, maybe if we did $1 million in profit, we're going to take out 10%. That's about $100K. That's why we took out the $100K. That's the most tax efficient way for us to pay ourselves. So now they could definitely argue, yeah, well, we made $200K over there as well because we had those distributions. Questions on this? Now we kind of know what we need, right? The company made about $100,000 this year, and it's sitting on about $350,000 worth of assets. So when it goes to make an offer, I'm multiplying whatever their seller discretionary earnings is. So I'm multiplying that million by whatever I think a fair multiple is. And then I'm going to add the assets to that. And that's my purchase price. So as we've kind of taught and discussed, we would say a pretty healthy company would be, we could give it a multiple of 3. So I do that multiple of 3 times a million. That's $3 million, the $350,000 of assets. That's $3,350,000. They wanted 5 million. We are not even close. Based on the size of their company, again, we need to talk to the owner and figure out. So here's another good question. How active is the owner? If the owner is completely out of the day-to-day, this could very well be worth more than a 3 multiple. The owner's not involved. He's making $1 million of profit. He's got 40 employees. It's a well-oiled machine. It's got recurring revenue. If they have all of their technology and everything's in place, and it's just this could be one of those opportunities where I buy it and I don't really have to do anything. Like, it would almost behoove me to stay the hell out of everybody's way. We've already got a really good system in place, and this is more of an investment for me. So
Your
now
job
it's
is
just
really not to just not go in and mess it
your
up.
job is don't screw anything up. Your job is to sit back and enjoy the cash flow. You could be making $1 million a year buying this. Do you guys remember the SBA will lend you up to $5 million? This is the perfect size company to maximize your SBA loan. All you have to do to qualify is not be a criminal and have above a 600 credit score, and then the deal itself has to cash flow. This could be a dream come true, and I like the model. I actually love the model. Appliance repair is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's a bit
Have you
recession.
or
They're just
Jake
getting
ever bought an
more
SBA?
expensive to fix.
Exactly. What was the other question?
Have you or Jake, do you guys have any of your businesses with SBA?
We've been prepared to and ready to, but we've been able to structure seller financing on 100% of the companies we've purchased so far.
Good for you.
Yeah, not against it though. Actually, really want to use it.
Yeah,
That's why our buy box is bigger now, and then we're going after those bigger opportunities because we know the power of it. We're just being very, very specific on what we purchase to make sure we stay kind of on brand in our buy box.
and so this particular one, the owner said you can use seller financing. And SBA on this particular opportunity makes a heck of a lot more sense. You can get into the SBA with 10% down. If that owner is going to carry the note, so SBA 10% down and you got 10 years to pay it back. If this owner is going to actually do seller financing, he's probably going to want like 30 to 50 to 60% down. And he's probably going to give you like 5 years to pay him back. Like, that cash flow is going to be so tight.
Yeah, Patrick asked a good question. Can you get pre-approved for SBA without having a business lined up? No, because SBA is a loan against the business, right? It's specific to the business, so that business can get pre-approved, not a person get pre-approved, right?
Correct. And it's kind of like, what do they call it when you're buying a home before you're like pre-qualified
Pre-qual.
or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, pre-qual. It is a little bit along those lines, but it's going to really come down to the strength of the deal, which is super cool. Because in some other business ventures that I've done in the past, I screwed up and real estate I bought, like, my debt to income is so bad that a bank wouldn't loan me a quarter right now to go get a piece of bubble gum. But that's irrelevant to this. They're looking at my experience and the cash flow I've created and other things, and then most importantly, the strength of the actual deal that they're lending against.
Yeah, Patrick asked, does it take a while to go through the SBA process? Yeah, so average is 30 to 90 days, but right around that 60 to 75, I feel like is pretty normal, which is very fitting for the time, you have in an LOI in your contract.
Yep. And some of the SBA loans can take forever, right? We've heard that, I remember it was Key Bank, or some of them are just super, super slow and it can take 6 months. The really, really cool thing about doing an SBA is you've essentially got the best underwriters in the world, because they're putting their money on the line and they work at the bank, helping you underwrite the entire deal. It's like you're getting a second set of eyes on the deal. So if I'm buying a big deal, I love the idea of having the SBA help me do it.
And extensions are easy to do. I mean, if they know that the only thing you're counting on or waiting on is the SBA approval, nobody's going to want to start over at 0 once they're 60, 70 days in.
Yep. Just good communication from get-go. And your SBA person could talk to the broker or to the owner and say, hey, this looks like a green light. Everything's moving along swimmingly. the biggest slowdown on the SBA is the seller getting the appropriate information to the bank to do their underwriting. But if they have everything already dialed and lined up, it can be a quick enough process where you should
And
be
if
able to
they're
stick to your
good working with
deadlines.
a good broker, they did all that in advance.
Yep. So I would want to know, we're just throwing out some questions here, like the number of vehicles. You know, do I need to hire more employees to take on any new business, or are we already maxed out or not? The questions about the distributions, the labor. Is it mostly W-2? Are they mostly employees? Just anything I can possibly do to figure out how this company functions and flows and what processes and systems they have in places, what they're doing to measure their success. Is there a layer of management? Is this truly a passive investment for me? Because if it is, I could be walking into an opportunity to passively, I hate to even say that word, to without being involved in the day-to-day at least, make $1 million next year. Obviously, there's a debt service behind that. So that would be, to me, the next thing is, now how the heck do I buy this company? So based off the multiple that I wanted, I would love to buy it at a 3 multiple. That's going to be $3.35 million offer. Odds are they're not going to go for that. This is a really, really strong business. So what I want to do is I want to figure out what's an offer that might be interesting to them that cash flows really well. You can literally just go to loan calculator. Jake and I have a calculator that's super cool, but my Excel isn't working properly right now. So I just go on Google and just go to loan calculator, and I can just punch in some different criterias in different situations and just see how this thing would cash flow. So I know that at $1 million a year of seller discretionary earnings, what is that? 73,000 a month, 83,000 a month of cash flow. 1 million divided by 12. Yeah, exactly. 83,000 a month of cash flow is what I got to work with. Obviously, the more of that I keep, the better. So if I were to give him his full asking price, and ultimately the multiple in which I pay this guy doesn't overly matter because what I'm buying is cash flow. So I just want a deal that cash flow is really strong. If I gave him 10x his asking price and the deal cash flows, or I gave him his asking price and it was a 10 multiple, but the deal cash flows like crazy, I don't overly care. I'm not walking around bragging or paying for dinners based on the multiple I bought. I'm paying for everything in my life based off of my cash flow. So that's the thing I care about most. So let's pretend that we are willing to give him exactly what he's asking. He wants 5 million. I am going to have to come up with 10% down. So I'd have to come up with 500K somehow. And then my loan would be 4.5 million. I know I can borrow that money on an SBA of for 10 years for sure. And I know my interest rate is give or take right around 10%. So my monthly obligations to borrow $4.5 million is going to be right around $60,000. So if I give him exactly what he was asking for the next 10 years while I'm paying off debt, if I don't grow the company $1, I'm going to be making $23,000 a month of profit. Can I get it for a little bit cheaper? You know, to me, the fact that he said he would consider seller financing kind of gives me an inkling of an idea that, hey, I know you said you'd consider seller financing, but if I just gave you all the money up front, can I get a little bit of a discount? Yeah, I'd take 10% off. I'll do the deal for 4.5 million instead of 5 million. Perfect. Money up front to him is just as good as me going to the SBA and having them give him that money up front. Calculate that. Now my payment is $52,000 a month. I'm going to be making about $30,000, just over $30,000 a month. So that little 10% off the asking price is significant. It's an extra $8,000 a month of profit.
But
Questions
Kyle,
on how? Yes.
what if I don't have $500,000?
Good question. On this particular deal, I've got an idea. Go back to his balance sheet here. So typically, if you don't have that money, is it worth giving up some equity to get somebody to partner on this deal with you? Could you borrow it at 10% from somebody? Like, if the deal's strong enough, there should be a way to raise capital to make it happen. In this particular scenario, this is actually the path we were going down. They have almost $500,000 in their bank right now. This is not their personal bank. This is their business bank. think if you were to ask them to leave that money in the bank for the sale. So, hey, seller, I know you wanted 5 million. I'll actually give you 5.5 million, but can you leave that money in the bank for the sale? And then I'll give you the 5.5 million. So you'll get it all back real quick. And then I could just borrow that 500,000 from somebody. And as soon as that deal closes, I could pay them 450,000 of that back right away. You can negotiate and get the SBA to lend on leaving money in the bank account. And I would say, hey, I just need that money in the bank account for like cash flow reasons. I just want to make sure I can pay wages, and I just kind of want to de-risk my purchase here. You definitely don't want to tell them, I'm going to leave them, have them leave $500,000 in the bank account so that I can reimburse myself for the down payment that I'm going to borrow from my uncle Jim. But on this
The only caveat here is the SBA will want to make sure that the business still evaluates and it gets approved at 5.5 for this specific example. Because if they value it at 500 or 5 million, that wouldn't be an option. But usually companies this size, you can creep up a valuation.
Yes, agreed. And it's a strong, healthy company. It's been around. It's got a lot of employees. Like, the bank just wants low risk. And this deal on paper looks like a very low risk play. So my whole play, just shooting from the hip here, would be going back to the seller and saying, hey, I know you said you would take seller financing. Like, would you give me a little discount if I just got you all the cash up front? Likely they would say, well, yeah, that sounds better than me waiting 3 or 5 or 10 years or whatever. Sure. So negotiate a 10% discount. They get it down to 4.5. And then my second ask is, can you just leave that $500,000 in the bank account? And as soon as the deal closes, I'll reimburse you the cash, and I'll give you the original 5 million. And so you're still getting that 500K back. So we negotiated to 4.5, but we're going to put it back up to 5 million because you're going to leave that 500 in the bank. I'm going to then borrow that $500,000 at an interest rate or give somebody 5%, 10% equity because they're making this whole deal possible. And then as soon as that business closes, I'm going to take that money out of the bank account. I'm going to pay them back. So I'm really only borrowing that money for a couple months while the deal closes. And now, my friends, we have just bought a business with zero of our own money.